All right, and I should be sharing my screen. Hopefully everyone can see the PowerPoint up on their screen right now. If you're having trouble seeing it, if you could raise your hand or or type something in the chat, please let us know. Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to the 2023-2024 Community Development Block Grant and Homeless Prevention Rapid Rehousing, or HPRR, application workshop. I'm Christine Fields, housing analyst with the City of Roseville. I administer our CDBG grant. Also with us today, we have Sarah Thornton, who will be presenting on the HPRR funds. We have also Trisha Isom, the city's housing manager, who's here, and she will be monitoring raised hands and the chat. So if everyone should be muted right now. If you do have anything any questions or anything you want to share, please either use the chat function that you should see at the top of your Teams meeting, or there's a raise your hand function. This little icon here should be able to click on reactions and then click on raise your hand, and you should be able to then have your hand raised. And everyone's cameras are also off as well to minimize distraction. And we will pause for a couple moments, different moments throughout the presentation for any questions. And if you did want to type the question in the chat, feel free to do so at any time. So first here we have our agenda. So in terms of the agenda, we're going to be going through the basics of CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant. And then we're going to go through our consolidated plan, which is our 5-year plan goals. We will take a little time to discuss any community needs. And then Sarah will take over and go over the homeless prevention and rapid rehousing. We'll go through the application process and requirements, our program year schedule, and then we'll do a little bit of a overview of Zoom grants if anyone has any questions about Zoom grants and how to apply. So first here we have our CDBG overview. So CDBG is also known, as I said, the Community Development Block Grant. And this is a federal program administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The purpose of the program is to reduce poverty and its effects by developing viable communities by providing decent, safe, and sanitary housing, providing a suitable living environment, expanding economic opportunities. The program promotes affordable housing and community development programs for low-income residents. So who is eligible to apply? So in terms of those eligible to apply, that includes city departments, nonprofit organizations, governmental agencies that are independent of the city of Roseville, and for-profit entities that are authorized under federal code. Those who are awarded funds are known as subrecipients. So all programs that receive CDBG funding must meet one of the HUD national objectives. The national objectives of the grant are to benefit low and moderate income persons and/or households, aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight, and/or meet an urgent community need that threatens the health or welfare of residents. This objective is rarely used and is generally associated with disasters. So next we're going to review how CDBG funds can be used. So first, each activity must meet one of the national objectives for the program, which we discussed on the previous slide. Funds must serve low to moderate income residents. So residents served must have a household income that is equal to or less than 80% of the area's household median income for that household size. And so there are some groups that are presumed by HUD to be made up of principally low, moderate income persons, which include abused children, elderly persons, battered spouses, homeless persons, adults meeting Bureau of Census definition of severely disabled persons, illiterate adults, persons living with AIDS, and migrant farm workers. So back to the income limits, for example, for starting in June of 2022, the income limit for a 4-person household is $81,050. And I can also post a link to the current income limits in the chat a little bit. All right, so what activities are eligible for CDBG funding? So CDBG funds may be used for activities which include but are not limited to acquisition of real property, relocation and demolition, rehabilitation of residential and non-residential structures, construction of public facilities and improvements such as water, sewer facilities, streets, neighborhood centers, and the conversion of school buildings for eligible purposes, public services within certain limits, activities relating to energy conservation and renewable energy resources, provision of assistance to profit-motivated businesses to carry out economic development and job creation and retention activities. Other activities may be eligible, and please contact program staff if you have questions about your specific program. I also want to mention that these slides will be available to you all if at the end, if you're interested, I can get your email address and have it sent out to you. So, so what costs are eligible and allowed costs? So eligible or allowed costs under the CDBG program must be directly related to the provision of services. So here are some examples of public service activities. So personnel or staff, salary and benefits. So the salaries must only be for persons involved in direct client services. Also, public service funding cannot be used for administrative costs. Office, facility, rental or lease costs, materials and supplies, communications, and travel mileage. At least 51% of program beneficiaries must be low or moderate income for public service activities. Then there are public facility or capital improvement projects, which include activities like property acquisition or rehabilitation, construction costs, or architecture and engineering projects. These public facility projects must guarantee at least 51% low and moderate income benefit. But costs are ineligible. So most activities that do not serve, that do not serve primarily low and moderate income individuals or households, programs or services that promote religion, political activities, marketing, incentives, or fundraising, payment of debt or expenses incurred prior to the agreement date, which would be July 1, 2023, and entertainment, furnishings, or personal property, or equipment purchase, which there are a few exceptions to that. So you could always ask us if you have specific questions about your eligibility. Oh, and I also see construction of new housing. There's a few exceptions to that. CDBG public service activities. So here are some examples of current programs that are receiving CDBG funding and are considered public service activities that you guys can look over on the screen. To utilize CDBG funds for a public service, the service must either be a new service or an expansion of an existing service. So you're either serving more people or providing additional services. And it must be a new service in terms of a new service for City of Roseville CDBG grant from the CDBG for the CDBG program. Public service activities are currently limited to 15,000 per activity. In the next year, that will likely increase a little bit. And also to note, the public service activities for CDBG in general, we cannot exceed 15% of the total grant allocation that we receive from HUD. So I believe I go over that in a later slide. So that's why we're pretty limited on the actual public service activities that we can do, because out of our whole grant, it's only 15% that goes towards public services. And on this slide, you can take a look at a few recent examples of projects that are receiving CDBG funding and are considered public facility activities. These projects are projects that we're currently working on for this program year. So one of them, we're installing a pedestrian gate for residents at Homestart, and that's providing increased safety and security for the residents. We're working on completing ADA modifications to the local neighborhood pool, Johnson Pool. And at the Gathering Inn, we're working on soundproofing rooms to provide confidential meeting spaces for the mental health clinicians and shelter guests. And then next, here we have some of the requirements for CDBG subrecipients that must be followed when they receive CDBG funding. So first, the subrecipient must track eligibility of program recipients of your program. So this includes a submission of quarterly reports on your activity. These reports will require income and household characteristics of the CDBG beneficiaries. These reports are completed in Zoom Grants, which is our online portal that we use for applications. And also on that all costs must be documented and must be provided as backup to invoices, which are also submitted through Zoom Grants. All costs are paid on a reimbursement basis. The grant, we don't cut a check at the beginning of the program year. Everything is reimbursement basis and after it's been reported on. So we don't pay those reimbursements until the associated quarterly report has been submitted and reviewed and approved. Funds may only be used for persons residing within the city of Roseville limits. We cannot provide funding for unincorporated areas of Roseville. All organizations applying for funding must have a non-discriminatory policy for membership and access to services. All organizations must have a unique entity identifier number, which we will discuss in a little bit later in the presentation. That used to be considered the DUNS number. So additionally, there are various procurement procedures depending on your activity. If you have a construction project, there are specific procurement procedures that must be followed based on your project. For example, projects may require the payment of prevailing wages, permitting costs, public noticing costs, and contingency costs. The city utilizes a consultant who's involved in our CDBG construction projects, and that the consultant would assist with the labor compliance side of these projects. These procedures vary by each project, so this can be discussed further on an individual basis if you have some sort of capital improvement project that you're interested in applying for. Next, we're going to go through the consolidated plan goals. The CDBG consolidated plan is a 5-year plan that is designed to help states and local jurisdictions to assess their affordable, housing and community development needs and market conditions, and to make data-driven, place-based investment decisions. So our current plan is from it started in 2020. It's going to go through the end of 2024. It's a 5-year plan that was approved by HUD. And let's see, the The consolidated plan is then carried out through the annual action plans, which provide a concise summary of the actions, activities, and specific federal and non-federal resources that will be used each year to address the priority needs and specific goals identified in the consolidated plan. So right now we're working on starting the 2023 program year annual action plan. And so that's what you all would be applying for. Activities that are awarded CDBG funds during this con plan cycle must be related to one of the goals, which we will talk about in the next few slides. And there are 8 goals that were defined in the creation of the 2020 consolidated plan, the 2020 5-year plan. So, for example, the first goal in the consolidated plan is addressing homelessness. So this one is addressing the needs of persons experiencing homelessness in Roseville and providing assistance to persons at risk of homelessness. Our next goal is development of affordable rental housing. So that's could be rehabilitation and development of rental housing affordable to very low and low income households. The third goal is rehabilitation of affordable rental housing. So this one would be rehabbing rental housing to maintain the stock of housing and affordable to low and very low income households. Then we have the provision of services for low income persons. So the provision of needed services for low income seniors, youth, victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, and persons with disabilities. Then we have providing fair housing services. So this goal is focusing on promoting access to fair housing information and educating tenants and landlords regarding rights and responsibilities under federal and state fair housing law. Number 6, so the rehabilitation of owner-occupied housing. So this is providing assistance for the rehabilitation of single-family homes occupied by low-income homeowners. And we have an owner-occupied housing rehabilitation program that we run also, and that meets this goal. As for the number 7, preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID. So the city received a separate allocation of funding for this purpose, which was known as CDBG CV funding. And all activities receiving this funding were directly related to COVID, and all funds have been awarded at this point. Lastly is public facilities and improvements. So this would be any funding for public facilities and improvements and qualified low-income census tracts and removal of architectural barriers projects. Out of those 8 goals, the highest priority needs were determined to be 3 of them are considered the highest priority, high priority needs. So the priority was assigned based on the level of need demonstrated by the data collected in the market analysis and needs assessment in the consolidated plan, the citizen participation process, and the availability of resources to address these needs. And this was all completed during the preparation of the 2020 plan that we have, the 5-year plan. So based on all of these components of those 8 goals, the highest priority needs were determined to be affordable housing, addressing homelessness, and preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID. And so the addressing COVID was added as a 3rd priority need since that was after the plan was actually developed, since COVID came out after the plan was actually developed. And as I said, that funding was a separate source of funding, and it's already been has been awarded. Now I just wanted to take a quick moment to open up for discussion for the service providers, what you see as current high priority needs, or anything you want to discuss about the development, of our annual action plan that's upcoming. And feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat if you'd like to share anything, or if there's anything you would like to share afterwards in terms of these community needs, feel free to contact us and share your thoughts. So if anyone has anything right now, feel free again to raise your hand or use the chat function, and we'll just take a minute and see if anyone has anything they want to discuss.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, Christine.
No. Okay. Thanks, Trisha. All right. And that's okay if anyone thinks of anything, down the line and wants to jump in and say anything, feel free. Or like I said, feel free to contact us separately after the workshop. And then I just wanted to give a little overview of our funding estimates for the 2023-2024 program year. So we're estimating our grant has been pretty steady around 700,000 the last couple years. So we're estimating it to be about the same this year. And we may also have some, a little bit of additional prior year program funds that were not used, and so they may be available to expend. That would be calculated and determined as the new program year approaches. So of the total grant that the city receives, 20% will go towards administration of the grant. 20% is the maximum allowed for administration costs for the city. The amount of CDBG funds used for public services shall not exceed 15% of the total grant awarded to the city. So those were the public services activities we were talking about earlier. So there's that 15% cap. So according to that cap, we can only award about roughly 105,000 for public service specific activities. And then, like I mentioned, currently each public service activity is limited to $15,000 max per program. And lastly, any remaining funding after the 20% cost for admin and the 15% for public services can go towards improvements, the rehabilitation of homes for low-income homeowners, and public facility costs. So we're estimating that to be around $455,000 that can go towards those sorts of activities. And please note that allocations of the public service related funds must be expended by the end of the program year, which would be June 30, 2024. And then we're just going to take a quick pause for any questions that may have come up. And then Sarah will be taking over to discuss the homeless prevention and rapid rehousing grant. If there's any questions, again, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand function, or type your question in the chat.
It looks like Jorge has raised his hand.
Oh, okay, thank you. Jorge, I will, can you, I don't know if you can unmute yourself. Let me see.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Hi.
Yeah, so my question was just repeating what you said at the end. So all the funding must be expended, you said, by, was it June 30th, 2024?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So actually that brings up a good point. So we get the program year starts July 1. It would be July 1, 2023. And although there's usually a delay with HUD, with us actually receiving our funding. So sometimes there's, a couple months where we're kind of waiting for our funding to actually be received and awarded. So technically the program year starts July 1, but yeah, funds should be expended by June 30th of 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
We have a couple more questions that came through. Kat Fuentes is asking, are for-profit organizations eligible to administer the public service dollars?
Are Are for-profit organizations eligible? Yes, I will. Yeah, let me confirm that. I don't think I've ever. But Kat, yes, I will confirm that with you, but I believe so.
And then Brooke Abrams is asking, do we need to obtain multiple bids on any capital improvements before submitting a grant request?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So, if you at least have, one estimate prior, so that we can kind of see how much about your project is going to cost, that's helpful. But yeah, once funds are awarded, then that's when we really need you to get, more estimates. But if you're able to before, and have if you're able to get several estimates, that's always helpful just to have as part of the application. Definitely.
And then Amy Scanlon is asking, when does reimbursement for activities begin? If receipt of funding from HUD is delayed to August, for example, can we still bill for July, or would we need to start in August?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So usually what happens is once we get the grant agreement from HUD, usually usually HUD will say these grant funds can be spent back from July 1st. We just can't, we wouldn't be able to actually do any reimbursements until we get that official letter from HUD stating that, if that makes sense. But let me know if I can clarify.
And then there was a follow-up from Kat saying that her organization is eligible through HUD, that she just wanted to make sure that the city allowed for-profit organizations.
Oh, that we allow for profit. Okay. Yes, Kat, I will verify for you. Still for the city, regarding the city.
And then we have another question here from Brooke. What is your typical award amount or range for physical improvement projects?
They range greatly. We have one right now that's only like a $8,000 grant, and then another one that's almost 300,000. So there's a really huge range depending on what your actual what your project is. But we don't have, a minimum or maximum for the capital improvements like we do for the public services.
Not seeing any other questions come in right now or any hand raising,
Okay.
but we got to thank you.
Okay, that's good. And okay, so we'll continue with Sarah's portion, and then we'll have another opportunity for any questions in a little bit. Okay, so
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm a housing analyst at the City of Roseville, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to go over the homeless prevention and rapid rehousing, or HPRR. So HPRR activities and programs. So activities may include assisting residents who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, including, but not limited to providing rapid rehousing, rental assistance, supportive case management services that allow people to obtain and retain housing, and operating and capital costs for navigation centers and emergency shelters. Next slide. So although you will use the same application process as CDBG, a separate application is required for the HPRR funds. The funds must be used to provide services within the city limits of Roseville and Rockland. And an estimated $978,000 will be available. The minimum award amount is $25,000 per program, and there's not a maximum award at this time. Go. You can go for it now.
sorry about that. Okay, next.
That's okay. Okay, so the 2023 HPRR funding sources include the low and moderate or low mod income fund at $250,000 and funding from the state's Permanent Local Housing Allocation, or PLHA program. So Roseville received PLHA funds of $509,204, as well as a maximum of $218,780 of funding allocated for Rockland this funding cycle. Roseville is administering Rockland's PLHA. So if your agency is granted PLHA funds and includes Rockland, it's imperative to serve Rockland families, or we do risk losing that funding. Additionally, if you are requesting funds to serve residents in both Roseville and Rockland, it would be helpful to describe in your project description how those funds will be split. So for example, you might say you're requesting $50,000 total, but you can state that $39,000 will be used to serve Roseville residents, and then $11,000 will serve residents in the city of Rockland. Next slide. So in order to receive PLHA funding, applicants must serve households earning no more than 30% AMI, as well as provide assistance in a manner consistent with the Housing First practices listed here. Applicants whose programs do not comply with Housing First practices will only be eligible to apply for the low mod funding. And if any applicants need help defining Housing First practices, please let us know. Our contact information will be on the final slide. So the 2023-2024 funding cycle will begin July 1st, 2023 and end on June 30th, 2024. Reporting is biannual, with reports beginning on July 1st, 2023, ending December 31st, 2023, and then beginning again on January 1st, 2024, and ending June 30th, 2024. So this will conclude the section for HPRR, and now we'll talk about application requirements. So there are a couple of requirements that are necessary to input into both the CDBG and HPRR applications. We need your tax ID number and then your unique entity ID or UEI number. If you have questions regarding how to obtain the UEI, please contact us and we can provide you with additional guidance. And we'll link a website with additional information in the chat as well. Last year, as some of you may know, the DUNS number changed to the UEI. The DUNS number is now completely removed, and registration, searching, and data entry now require the UEI. Existing registered entities can find their unique entity ID by clicking on the link, while new entities can get theirs at the sam.gov website. Registration may need to be completed for that. But again, if you have questions regarding how to obtain a UEI, please contact us. We'll link another part of the website with additional information in the chat. So for the application review process, all applications are reviewed and ranked based on the following criteria. So I'll give you guys just a couple seconds to review some of these. Okay, I think we'll go to the next slide. So this is our 2023-2024 program year schedule. You, your staff, and your clients are welcome to attend the City Council meeting on May 3rd at 6 p.m. in support of the CDBG and HPRR programs. Just please note that these dates are subject to change. And I will pass it off to Christine to close us out.
Thank you, Sarah. So applications are due by 11:59 p.m. on February 6th, 2023, which is a Monday. And then let's see what's next. If there are any of you that haven't used Zoom grants before, this is just a little slide with some, ideas for working in Zoom grants. So you'll want to make sure that you're saving your application as you go through it. It's only going to autosave if you click outside the box where you're typing. So you can click anywhere on the screen, and then you should get a little message that pops up that says saving. And then you can also, always work in Microsoft Word and then just go in and paste everything that you typed into Zoom Grants application. But just make sure you click paste as plain text, because sometimes the wording comes out kind of strange if you just paste. So you right click usually in the box, and you should be an option to paste as plain text. And then if there's multiple people that are working on the same application at the same time, that is okay, but they just can't be working on the same exact question at the same time, or it won't work. So, in just a moment here, I'll go ahead and try to add all those links in the chat, including this Zoom Grants link that can also be found on the city's website. If you search CDBG, the link to the our specific Zoom Grants application will be on there. And then again, as Sarah mentioned on the last slide, we'll have the contact information for us, those of us at the city. And then, but if you have any technical or website questions, there's a Zoom Grants University on Zoom Grants, and that's really helpful. It has a lot of articles with helpful information and when you're, applying and whatnot. So, and they also have a technical support where you can email them at questions@zoomgrants.com. But yeah, you should see like a help somewhere on I think it's at the top of the page of the Zoom Grants application. You should see a help link for those technical or website related questions. Just take a second for questions, and I'll try to get those links posted in the chat right now, and then I'll have our contact information. And then if any of you do want a copy of the slides, maybe we can just have you post your email address in the chat, and then that way I can see who wants copies of the slide. And then we will be creating a YouTube link of this recording as well, which we should have either later today or early next week. So if you want either of those things, if you could just type your email address in the chat, that would be helpful. But let me try to get those links posted for you guys in the chat right now.
We have one comment from Louise Arquilla saying, I guess saying yes to copying text into Zoom Grants, and that if you use Control V, it will paste as plain text and get rid of most of the invisible characters.
Oh, okay.
So she's just, letting us know that that's a good way to do it. And Kat, I see your question in here again. We will definitely get back to you on the nonprofit status. Donnie DeBolt is asking if part of the funding request can be spent on administrative overhead, and if so, is there a specific percentage?
Can you guys hear me? Let's see. On administrative overhead, and if there's a specific percentage, is that first you're asking for CDBG?
That's a good question, Donnie. CDBG, HPRR, both.
Okay. HPRR, I'm not sure. And then administrative overhead. I'm sorry, what did you say? Administrative overhead, if there's a percentage?
Right.
Okay.
I can look that up for HPRR. I'd have to get back to him on that.
We can
Okay.
write that question down, and
Yeah.
I see Donnie's email here, so I'll make sure that we get back to you, Donnie.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Trisha. Yeah. Get back to you.
There's a whole bunch of emails in the
Email,
chat, so we can email the slides out.
Okay. And then I'm posted a link to the HUD income limits. And then now this is an article on the unique entity identifier number that we were talking about. If you guys need to take a look and see if there's anything you need to update for your organization, that's kind of a place to start. And then I think that this link is for a separate helpful article about the UEI, or it might be the same. I think it's a different one. The link I just posted. And then, I was going to also post the Zoom grants. The Zoom grants link for, oops. One second here. This should be the link to the city Zoom grants page. Checked. Hopefully that last link will take you straight to Roseville's application form, which will, like we talked about, the CDBG and HPRR is in the same application. You would just have to do separate applications for each. Or if you have separate CDBG programs you're applying for, they would just be separate applications done in Zoom grants too. And let's see. I think those were all the links we were going to post, and then we've got those questions that we will follow up on. Have everyone's email address that wants this copy of the slides, and I think that's it. I did have. I want to show the contact information again. So for CDBG, if you have CDBG related questions, please email them to this email inbox right here, housing@roseville.ca.us. And please just put something in your subject line that's acknowledges CDBG. And then we also have the HPRR contacts. So there's Sarah, who was presenting today. There's her number and her email address. And then Suzanne Akrell, who wasn't able to be here in the presentation today, but she also is running the HPRR funding. So there's her email address listed here as well. And then if anyone has any more like Zoom grant specific questions, you can feel free to stay on and I can try to help you with that. Or if you want me to send you out a PowerPoint that I have on just kind of gives you an overview of how to apply, I can do that as well. Just maybe let me know in the chat if you're interested in that. And otherwise, that should be it, unless anyone has any last minute questions.
I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat just yet.
Okay. Okay. Just another request. Okay. And if there's no other questions, we should be done. Again, we will get this sent out to you all who are interested. And oh, I see, Kat, you want the how to for Zoom grants. I will send that to you too. And that may be it, unless anyone has anything else. If not, thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you all soon.